Hey there, in today's video, I am doing well, I have it right in front of me here. You can kind of see it upside down. A collaged, then painted over multiple times, and then parts of the collage torn up from the bottom, creating kind of additional layers, and then a black glaze over the top. So it actually, when you're watching the process, you probably think this is not that interesting or even that great of an idea, but I think at the end, you might see the result. So this is one of those times where I feel like I'm just kind of messing around and practicing, and I had done this a week ago, and then I thought, oh my gosh, I should show you guys what I did, because I feel like the result is very unexpected. And even as I was doing it, you know, I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm really happy with it, but you just don't know. And I think those are the discoveries that are the most fun. And then you can decide, hey, I want to try this with, I did it with green. I'm going to try it with yellow. I'm going to try it with pink, whatever, blue, whatever color you want, and then just see the different results. And here it all started because when I put down collage, and the original time I did this last week, I didn't adhere the collage papers very well, and I had layered them, and some were thick, and I started pulling them up because they were bubbled underneath after I painted on it. And it was like, oh, I made this really cool discovery. So sometimes our mistakes can lead us to some really interesting things. I just feel like it's just kind of always startling to me. It's like, oh, wow, who knew? And probably somebody else has done this before, right? And maybe they intentionally did it. So the next time when I want to show you guys, I was looking through all my journals. It's like, which page doesn't look like it's glued down very well? So it's just sometimes those mistakes that can lead us to some really great discoveries. And what I want to say too is just getting started sometimes is the biggest hurdle, because I've kind of been in that the last few weeks, because I had taken a week off and then for vacation, and then I came back, and then I did not even know how or where to start. And finally I just said, oh my gosh, put some paint, that a color maybe you don't even like, a tube you're trying to use up. I always have to trick myself a little bit. And sure enough, I did it on top of this collage paper, and it turned into something really cool. Because once you get started, it's getting in motion, then it's okay. But if you're like me and you need to trick yourself, just, you can try this project. Oh, that isn't great collage. I'll just paint over the top of it and peel it up and do these different things. So it can be a great way to get started. It can just be a great way to use up colors that you don't use. It can just be a fun thing to use colors that you do love. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach this project. But I think, like I said at the end of the video, I think I talked a little bit about it. It's like, I actually think I might do this on a canvas in a bigger format. I think it could be very interesting. So I didn't expect that from making this, but if you like texture and if you like unexpected results, this project is for you. If you don't, you may want to avoid this one. But anyway, without any more jibber jabber, let's get started. To get started, I am working on a collage background that I've pre-done. I do have video on how I create backgrounds like this. I think I did it a few weeks ago, and I can link that below. And then I just chose a couple brighter colors, a vivid lime green, a light green permanent, I think, and the cadmium yellow light. And I also put out some white. And because I like to grunge things up a little bit, I did put out some unbleached titanium. But the beauty of what I'm doing is going to come later, because I needed to start with brighter colors so that when we go over the top with the glaze, it kind of it changes the color and mutes it and creates this really cool effect. So there's a couple things I'm going to be doing today. Not only am I going to be putting paint on, but I'm also going to be pulling up some of this collage paper from underneath, because I'm going to paint it several times. So it's going to create some different texture. There's already a lot of texture going on, but it's going to create some unique texture as well, because we'll paint, then I'm going to tear up some of the paper, then paint again, and then we'll see how it goes. And I'm not going to use these paints plain, which if you've ever seen anything I do, I tend to mix paints, but I wanted to put out a few different colors, so I kept it kind of bright. And I am going to create, let's just do it right now. Let's just grab one of these graphite blocks. I'm just going to kind of create something along here like this, maybe like a faux horizon line, just to kind of add a little bit more interest. So I'm going to have one color here, and then maybe the whitish, beigeish color up here. And so anyway, I'll just kind of start, just going to mix these kind of greens together a little bit, and not as most of you probably know if you watch any of my videos, I don't use bright colors a lot. I tend to go more for the grungier colors. And I'm using a palette knife. Anyway, I'll finish one thought before I go on to another. And the being, just because I think it's important to choose the things that you love, whether it's, I might like grungy colors, you might like bright colors, but it's important to choose what you like and to just embrace that. I think we have to, it's okay. I mean, I spent a lot of years making paint, copying other people, artists I was taking classes from who love bright colors. And, you know, it wasn't me, but I learned a lot from that. And one of the things I learned is that it's not, those are not the colors that I'm drawn to, but I can certainly use them. And so anyway, I do have a lot of brightly colored paints from that time period. And sometimes you just got to use stuff up. And for me, what I found is by glazing, I can take those bright colors and use them, even though I think, it's hard to grab those colors because it's just I'm just not drawn to them. So anyway, I don't remember what I was saying before, but you guys seem to follow along anyway, even though half the time I'm talking and then I can't remember what I said. Okay, so I'm just trying to get a first coat on here. And I'm kind of mixing and matching the paint. I'm not really, I just want to get a first coat on. Oh, I know. I was talking about the palette knife. I'm using a palette knife, one, because a paintbrush can really get in all the crevices because of the bristles. And I want it to kind of a little bit sit on top, not totally, but I don't want it to be perfect. I don't want it to be perfectly painted, I guess is what I'm doing. So I would even kind of do some of this. And maybe I add just some pure yellow by itself. This is experimenting and practicing in your art journal. So maybe I should put that as the title. Okay, I'm not really, where am I gonna clean that off? Maybe I will grab a piece of paper. So I grabbed a piece of paper, and this is typically what I do when I'm cleaning things off. This will become collage paper later. But I wasn't gonna clean it off, but then I thought, well, I don't want the top to be completely green too, and this green might take over. I do have another palette knife sitting here, but for whatever reason, I want to just use one palette knife, okay? So today I'm gonna try to just use this one, even though it's got a little bit of green on it. So I might add a little bit of yellow into this. The yellow is a little bit old, and so is that, the light green permanent. And I think what happens is, you know, you have these colors and you don't use them. And here's a good reason to just use them, because they start getting bad. That's a little more yellow than I wanted up there, but that's okay, because I'm going to paint this a few times. And if it looks like there's no rhyme or reason to what I'm doing, you're right, because I just want to get the paint on for this first coat, and then I'm gonna have to let it dry. I may bring a blow dryer in, but I'm not going to have you guys watch that boring part where it's like I'm drying it, and I don't want green up there, but there's green anyway. Okay, well that's okay. I'm going to paint this second coat, and I can take away that green if I don't want it. What I was starting to say is, as I always get sidetracked, I'm not going to have you watch me figure out how to dry it. I often use a heat tool, a heat gun kind of tool thing to dry my paint. Sometimes I just let it dry naturally, which in some ways I do prefer, and then I come back later. So either way, whichever way you decide is perfectly fine. I do get impatient. I think that's why I work on, like, you know, 4 art journals at a time. 7, well, I think I have 7 currently going, but a lot of them, I don't have them all open at the same time, but it's because I'll set this aside to dry while I move on to the next thing. So, okay, so this is plenty of paint. My tendency right now is to get in there and make some marks. So I'm going to, even though that's not what my plan was, because I'm going to, I just want to mess it up, because that's kind of how I like to paint, how I like to do things. So I have these mark making tools off to the side, but the marks will go away. It's just, that was an impulse. That was an impulse. And I think sometimes you just got to go with what you feel like doing. What I'm going to do is let this dry, and then I'm going to peel up. I'm going to show you. I'll just show you when I do it. So we'll let this dry, and then I'll come back. It's been drying for a couple minutes, but it's not long. I'm going to pull back some of the paint, if it's still possible, just a little bit. So it's not quite as thick as when I first put it on, because I want to be able to see where I want to pull up some of the, put it over thicker on some parts, where I'm going to be pulling up the paper underneath. So I kind of want to be able to have a visual on that. So I just wanted to show you that I had plied it thickly, but now I'm pulling a little bit of it back off. And we're going to do this a few more times. Even though it's still kind of wet, kind of tacky, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in the spots where there's bubbles. Now I specifically chose this collage paper, and I should have mentioned it ahead of time and pointed that out because I could see there were some air bubbles in there. To me, air bubbles are different than wrinkles. Wrinkles are glued down. It's just a wrinkle in the paper but it's still adhered, to the surface. Air bubbles, and I don't know that you will be able to see this very clearly, mean that there's air underneath, obviously. It's an air bubble, and it didn't adhere, the glue didn't adhere, it wasn't smoothed out enough. And often in my rush, this happens. So often I will go prior to painting on it and pull up some of those pieces. And if I need to, I will reapply paper. But in this case, I'm using it to my advantage. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tear up, and I have a kind of a pointy, these are pottery tools that I use for mark making tools. I can get in there and I'm going to pull up, and you're going to think, oh, that's crazy, you just painted that. But I'm going to pull up those spots. So this part of it, I have no idea what's going to happen. Now this is a bigger area than I anticipated, but that's okay. I'm just going to throw this over here to the side as I pull it up. So whatever pulls up, that's what I'm going to do. It looks like there's some handmade paper underneath there. You just never know. So I may just leave that for this time, and I'm going to look around and see if there's any other spots. And then I will pull those up, but I'm going to do that in fast forward so you see what I'm doing. I'm just looking for spots that are not necessarily wrinkled, but look like there's a bubble. And then I'm going in with my tool and lifting those up and then peeling that paper back. Paper is fairly dry, not 100%, and not as much as if I was working not on camera. But as you can see, I pulled up some random places. I think there's a few more that I could actually do, but again, I'm going to paint several layers and then I will keep painting over it. So I'm going to paint again over the top of this with these different colors mixed together. I might try to, maybe I'll make it a little bit different, maybe a little more yellow this coat. I don't know. So actually I could add in some white if I wanted. That couldn't I? Let's just mix that up. I think you can see that. And I like each kind of layer to be slightly different, and I'm going to do it fairly quick. Last time I think I was a little more careful than I would normally be, but this is kind of on that is coming out, that little piece of handmade paper. But that's okay. I'm just gonna kind of go with it. This is an experiment. So you have to kind of sometimes remember, like, not everything is about the finished product. Obviously, that's hard because we get hung up on wanting things to look and be a certain way. But when I am just wanting to mess around and figure out some new techniques, I find that my art journal is a great place to do it. And using old paint takes away when I am feeling like, oh, I'm wasting paint or something like that. So, which we shouldn't, because in order to experiment and to learn, we have to use paint. And also, if you don't use it, it gets bad. I'm just like, my paint down there, like this green it's getting thick and it's not as usable as my newer paints and the paints that aren't just sitting idle. What I'm going to do this time is I want to make a little bit more mess like this, okay? And as you notice, I didn't cover all of the other green because I want the different shades to show forth. So I'm going to clean this off on here, on this book paper. And then I'm going to use my white. I'm not going to I didn't really like putting, I put yellow in the last round. I'm not going to do that this time. And that's part of learning too. It was a little too yellow for me. And so I'm just going to use the white with the Titan or unbleached titanium and just see what happens there. So it's a little lighter, which is good because I'm
wanting a little bit of contrast with the two upper and lower, but I'm also going to not, I'm trying to be a little reckless or careless. So the fun thing is it's adding, the different layers are adding to it by, I know it probably doesn't make sense and maybe on camera it's not showing up as much, but there is deeper like holes, I guess, in the collage because I pulled up some of it, and that will be reflecting differently when we do the glaze at the end. So I'm gonna try, oh, I got more green in there, that's okay. But kind of like it to be not a perfect line. And if you did want one, certainly you could go back in, I have this huge charcoal blocks, and you could just kind of put your horizon line back in if that's something that you wanted. So it'll be more noticeable when we do the black glaze, and you can certainly make that glaze in darker there to create more of a horizon line if that's something that you want to do. Okay, so now this needs to dry. We're going to repeat the same process over and over again. Probably I will, yes, I will. When I come back and pull that up, I will just show you that in fast forward. You might be thinking now, oh my gosh, her collage is terrible because she doesn't adhere anything to the surface. And what happens is a lot of times when I'm working on camera, I'm working quicker and less carefully than I would be if I was working on my own. So I think this was a page that I did that way. But in general, often I do work quickly, and so this does happen to me. It's not like it's the first time where I've had places where I can peel up, because you might be surprised that I keep finding more and more places as I'm putting more paint down. Now, if you're the kind that's super careful, this is not going to work for you because all your papers will be nice, but I layer paper upon paper, and as you can see, when I'm pulling something up, sometimes, and even right here, I could still pull this, there's paper underneath. So it's not that there is just one layer of paper. A lot of times I put paper over the top of paper. So anyway, it makes it interesting, and the texture is getting very, very interesting. And I can actually see some bubbles for the next round. So we'll do this one more time. I think I'm going to try each time to get a little bit slightly different color, although I'm just using the same mix. Maybe I'll add some of this in. Let's just see what happens. Just to make it interesting and to add, as you can see, different colors. If I had been thinking, what I would have done is, and I guess I kind of did this. The first one was a little bit dark, then light, then lighter. So there's that to think about too. Like if you're going to layer and want some of those layers to show through, it's good if you can have the colors be slightly different, although it doesn't have to go dark to light necessarily. So, okay, so I'm just going to paint again. Now this is actually the same color, so I'm gonna lighten it up a little bit more, just because I do want it to be slightly different. Let's just take all of that, so that each layer, that we can see the different colors. And I could have chose 3 different greens, and that might have helped, just to make it more interesting. But yeah, I'm working with a very, very limited palette here, so it is tricky to get it to look too different from each other, but that's a little bit different. Yeah, not huge. You might not be able to see it on camera, but it's a little bit different. So I'm going quickly, scraping it fairly thin, but at the same time, I'm going to get most of it covered, but then scraping back and then getting some up into the white a little bit. Okay, almost done here. And it should just be fast. I know I've kind of probably spent a little more time on it than I would normally. And just to kind of show you, kind of get you the gist of what I'm doing. Okay, so now let's do the white, and I will, again, put my palette knife off to the side. And I guess I need some more white. So let's squeeze some out here. Okay. My big tub of titanium white is finally gone, and so I have another one ordered. But in the meantime, I have some tubes in case I ever just need tubes of paint white for something. So it's nice to have those on hand. I don't typically use them unless I don't have a big tub. I like reaching into the big tub and getting it a little dirty paint. Okay, so I'm gonna scrape that off as best I can, put it on, scrape it off, kind of make it messy on the horizon line, and then this will dry and we'll peel one more time and then put the glaze on. Because I didn't foresee actually ripping this much more off, I am going to paint one more time and then just glaze. I won't be pulling any more off. Obviously, I did not, my collaging this time, I can feel some of the paper was really heavy that I was trying to collage down, and I obviously didn't do that great of a job. But again, for this particular thing that I'm doing, it's actually great because now I'm able to create all these different and interesting layers that I wouldn't have been able to if I had properly collaged the paper down. So, all right, I'm just gonna paint one more layer on, and I'm trying to decide whether maybe I go a little bit darker, or I'm just not sure. I'm trying to get slightly different color, but I'm not, it's tricky with these two greens. I can't really get anything. Maybe I'll put in some of this unbleached titanium just to try to mix it up a little bit, which I think I did last time, but anyway, it's fine because we're gonna glaze over the top and it'll be just as interesting as can be. So, and I guess I could have used it pure or even darker. I guess I could mix it up. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll kind of use a little bit darker because I'm just trying to, yeah, maybe that's what I should do. Use a little darker, slightly darker. Maybe go in with a little bit different, just to give some variation in color. Doing it quickly. That wants to peel up. Let's just do it. Okay. Okay. And this third coat, I'm not worried about getting every speck of it. And I am trying to scrape off as much as I can as well. So if some of these words or that text come through, that's kind of a nice addition. And let's just kind of make some waves up there. Okay, because I'm gonna glaze over this, and if there's variations, then it will look a little more interesting, and you can see there's parts that aren't fully covered in paint, and that definitely will add to the interest of it. I'm gonna wipe my palette knife off. Actually, I'm gonna rub it with a cloth. Okay, and then I'm gonna go over with this final white up at the top, mostly white. So, again, I'm not trying to hit every single place. And some of this paper will be very interesting when it's when it is glazed because it will absorb the glaze which is just paint. I'm just using kind of a watered down paint. You could use an actual glaze, which is a different, it's a medium that you can add, a glazing medium, but I'm calling glaze in this case just a watered down or a fluid acrylic. Actually, I'm just going to use a fluid acrylic, so I don't know why I'm saying watered down. Well, I will add water to it. So, okay, so this is pretty much done. This is what I had wanted, just to pull up some tiny pieces, but you can see there's some text here. There's some paper that isn't fully covered around here, and that will make interesting variations when the glaze goes over the top. So this has got to dry pretty much all the way. If you do a glaze, and I've done this because I think it's good to experiment. I've done it, I've glazed on top of things that are not wet like this, but semi-dry. And what happens is sometimes the glazing paint mixes with the paint that you already have down, and that gives an interesting effect. So I'm all about just trying things because once again, if we're working in an art journal, really, we shouldn't just be doing the same old, same old. I mean, yeah, of course you can, but it is a place to try different things and to see what might happen. And that can lead itself to further discoveries as you go along and things you like, or maybe things you don't like. And so anyway, I have done it over the top of, semi-dry paint. And I kind of like that, but I typically try to wait till it's fairly dry, mostly dry, well, all the way dry, and then put the glaze over the top. So in this case, we're gonna wait. And then if I'm patient anyway, and you won't see that result this time, but I'm hoping to let it wait. And then I'm going to grab it real quick. I'm actually going to, normally I would use, sorry, I get ahead of myself and I want to start talking about something else. Normally I use raw umber as a glaze, but I saw something that had kind of more blackened glaze, and I was very intrigued by that. And so I've been wanting to try black. But I decided not to use carbon black because it's very opaque. But the bone black is, does it say back here? It's not as opaque. I guess it kind of shows here. You can kind of see through it. And I feel like the bone black has a little bit of brown in it. It's just a different black. And so I'm going to use the bone black, and this is a fluid, and I will actually water down the page, but I'll show you all that in a few minutes once this page dries. While the paint is drying in my art journal, I want to show you, and I've probably talked about this in other videos, what I do with this paint, leftover paint. I know I have. What I typically do is I grab an old book. This is an old book that I use to clean off my paintbrushes or my palette knives, and I literally just use up the paint like this. Now I have a piece of collage paper, and the next time I'm painting, I might go over it with, some white to add some interest or some shapes or whatever. It's not a work of art. It's paper I'm going to use down the road. The other thing is, I'll show you here in a second, I grab an art journal, and let's find a page. Probably should grab one that didn't have so much done in it. Okay. And I just create a background. So I put the paint on. Usually I'd have a paintbrush, but it's okay. And I could grab a paintbrush because all my paintbrushes are right here on my, right next to me if I wanted to, but I'm just, for the sake of example, and I've just been using one tool the whole time. So I'm just gonna cover this page with the green. And then when I come back later, I have something already started. So that is how I use up my leftover paint. In case you were wondering, or in case you thought I just threw that out, I never throw it out. I always use every last bit. So I always allow a little extra time to paint with my leftover paint. And sometimes I am surprised at the results. They are almost better than when I'm actually trying to paint, because I'm not thinking about it and I'm like, oh, it doesn't really matter. So in that case, I can be free. And that just shows you sometimes when if you let yourself be free, you can do something that you can't do when you're actually trying to perform or make something that looks good. For the last step, the page is dry, and I'm going to just use the bone black, grabbing and a spray bottle, and I'm going to put the black here, And I'm gonna spray the page just a little bit, because what's gonna happen is I'm going to put the paint on, but then I'm going to wipe it off with a paper towel. So it's kind of this push and pull. Like I put it on, wipe it off, push it on, put it on, wipe it off. I mean, I can do it as many times as, you can do it as many times as you want it. So my paintbrush, I typically use like these mop brushes that hold a lot of water. And in fact, I'm even gonna dip it into my water over here, even though it's a little bit dirty, before I dip it into the paint. So even though this paint is fluid, it feels a little thicker, so it could be actually a little older too. So it's typically fluid paint doesn't just sit, it kind of pools out. But all right, so I'm going to get a nice coating, and then I'm going to coat the whole thing, and then I'm going to wipe it off. So it's just however much you want to put on, but I try to do it fairly quick. And there's already water on there. That's why some spots it's kind of pulling up, because there is water on there. Okay, I might have thought I wasn't going to need that much paint, but I'm going to put some more out. I like everything to be fairly covered the first time around. I don't always go over it. I'm going to spray my paintbrush a little bit here. I don't always go over it more than one time, but sometimes if I want it darker in certain spots and I've wiped it off, I actually do go over it. So it's, you know, personal preference how it ends up. So you might be kind of freaked out going, oh, what's happening? But once it gets wiped off, it's not so scary. Okay, let's move things around here so my book is moving. Okay, you can see how the black is into these little crevices and holes, which is just so fun. And hopefully I am not moving the camera too much because it is sitting on this table. Okay, so here's what I do at this point. I'm like, I like the glaze, but it's a little much. I want to have some more variation in color. So I would take my spray bottle and my paper towel, and I would, you know, get it wet, and then it will pull some more off. As long as your paint isn't fully dry. Just keeps pulling. I'm going to keep at it. Okay, I like that. This one, because that some spots didn't have as much layering, and so they're going to look a little bit different, but I like how that's looking. I'm going to do the same thing down here. The good thing is I can go over it again if I want with another, like I was saying before, like another round of glaze. I'm not sure what's happening over here. It's a little heavy, so I'm going to scrub it a little harder. There we go. Not sure why that is. I keep looking for a fresh spot on my paper towels. Most of you know I don't really like using a lot of paper towels. It feels very wasteful, so I tend to use old rags like this. But in the case of this kind of thing, I typically do use paper towels. So, but okay. I don't know if you guys can see this, how cool this is turning out. And these spots that I ripped the paper up that don't have as many coats, they look completely different. I mean, it's just such a fun, and you just don't know what you're going to get till the very end. So part of you might be going, oh my gosh, why would you do it that many times? All those different layers, keep painting, take it off, paint, peel, paint, peel, paint, peel. Because I think it's the process of doing that, the layers get more interesting. And I will drop in another, I will try to show you. I did another one similar to this last week, and that's what gave me the idea, because I was like, I got to do this again. I got to do it a few times with some different colors. Although I did it with green last time, and so I decided, well, I better stick with what worked last time. But yeah, it's just such a cool effect, and you don't know necessarily what you're going to get when you are peeling up those layers. And I think that is the part that I like, that you can't predict, but you can just keep going and keep peeling. And even though it's scary and you don't know how it's going to turn out, as you probably were watching this process, you're thinking, well, that's not that interesting. That's not really that cool, until you put the glaze on, and then it's like, I love it. So anyway, I hope that this spurs you on. Like, use whatever color. Maybe, I tend not to use the brighter colors, and I will say with the glaze, it's good to start with kind of a brighter color, but maybe it's a color you don't use a lot, like me. You're trying to use up these paints that you don't use all the time. Any color palette would work. So I would definitely, if you're interested in this, give it a try with whatever paint you have on hand. Do not go buy these particular colors that I use, because I'm trying to use them up as well. But when I use them and then glaze over them over collage, it ends up being something very interesting. And I got to say, I'm really considering doing this on canvas, although maybe a hard cradle board would be better because of the, digging around, and canvas sometimes, will move in and out. But I was like, oh my gosh, I think this would be really cool as a big art piece. So, and I don't always say that. I don't always say like, oh, I think this would turn out good, but only because there's so many interesting shapes. And I'm really glad that I kind of did some things with the paint, because this, I feel like it's interesting. Now, here's another thing I had mentioned before. You could go over this, and maybe I'll just do it because it doesn't matter. If you wanted your horizon line to be a little bit more, delineated, I don't know if I'm using the right word there, but then you could go over it again. So let's just do that instead of jibber jabbering about it. So this is my horizon line, and I'm just going to maybe make that a little more defined. Maybe not. Let's see. Gets in those crevices a little bit more. Not really. But I feel like this spot right here could be, maybe if I don't take it off quite so harshly. Anyway, you could go back over it if you wanted and add more, make it darker in spots, take it off, keep taking it off, make this lighter like I'm doing here, which maybe is interesting. It's pulling that back, and then there's some green up there. Anyway, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just finding what you like. So like I started to say, thank you guys for watching, and I hope this inspires you to do collage, use your collage pages that that are just sitting there idle, maybe in your art journal or sketchbook, and just put some paint over the top and see what happens. And if you think the colors are too bright, try this bone black. I think you might like it, or probably any black would work. Or raw umber, which is actually my favorite, raw umber. So I'm exploring and trying new things with the bone black. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.